Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of QuiggyTube. I thought that name to be a little bit too ridiculous, but I seem to be sticking the landing on it. So, here on our third recorded video, it's very possible that this actually becomes the name of this here video diary. Anyways, this week I want to talk about sensory stimulation. And at the end of this conversation, really is kind of a plug for float tanks. So if there are any float companies out there that want to pick this up and build some advertising into this, please, I'm here for you as your spokesperson. But without monetary desire as a motivation here, there is a sincere intention to share my thoughts around a very overstimulating world and how that you know difference between you know look, I look at everything through I think evolutionary psychology is a really important way to view the way that we relate to and adapt to our modern world, because from a biological perspective, our brains have not really changed at all since our last evolution into the current form of Homo sapiens that we are. Was it 700,000, 70,000 years ago? When we were living on the plains without any stimulation, there were no TVs, there was no Times Square, there was no, there was music starting to come out of things, but we were only stimulated by nature, by serene nature, and so we still have those same brains right now, and I think that there's a distinction between the adaptation of a species that happens over incredibly long periods of times to help them survive and evolve, and short-term adaptation, which I think we're also really good at doing. And yet a lot of the short-term adaptations that we do don't have long-term health and benefit in mind. And so, to give you an example of what I mean is, like, we've adapted to this very overstimulating world, and yet our primitive adaptation systems in our brain aren't looking out for the long term. They aren't really, there's not really like so what I'm trying to do is bring a higher level cognitive thinking into understanding how we're adapting and why we're adapting and whether or not it's actually good for us. And so the Industrial Revolution has brought so much technology into our world within the past 200 years, and now we're just caked in technology and convenience and stimulation. So Times Square is kind of like the visceral epitome of the commercialized, technologically stimulating world. You stand in the middle of Times Square and you're just like, "Mah." And if a cave person walked into Times Square, their brain would fucking explode. But we are so desensitized to it. We've had that short-term adaptation where we can grapple with it in the short term, but we're not necessarily in tune with the long-term detriments. And so that's what this conversation is about, is helping bring some insight into the realization that we truly live in an overstimulating world, and not just in the sense of like the five senses, but also in our responsibilities and our work-life balance and the pressures and our I don't know if I'm going to put this before or after the conversation about community, but certainly in the amount of social relationships that we engage in and commit to. We have so fucking much on our plate and on our brains and on our minds, and that short-term adaptation can kind of like you know kind of sort some things out of the way and bring some things to the front of mind. But I can almost guarantee that every one of us in some way, shape, or form can relate to the feeling of having a bajillion tabs open in the mind and in the body. When you're working on something and you got Safari or Google Chrome or whatever the hell you use open and there's a bajillion tabs open, it's actually really like, even though we may be on one tab, we're really spread thin. There's like a background operating system that is thinking about in some way, shape, or form each of these little things, and we struggle to put those down. And so I think that's kind of the chronic state that we're in this world. We're trying to focus, which is just so essential to anything and everything. And there's so much of a conversation about that to be had. And yet there's so many things that are pulling for our attention. And even, for those of us who can focus and sit still, we do still have those tabs running in the background and these things grabbing for us, and they affect us. And I'd say they affect us quite negatively. Water break. Water break for everybody. I am eternally a camp counselor and here to make sure that everybody is hydrate. Hydrate or dihydrate. So, yeah, we live in this overstimulating world, socially, viscerally. The amount of content and movies and TV and music and phones and responsibilities, and it feels nice to a certain degree because stimulation in this world is generated really on a pleasure seeking level. A lot of these things are designed to hit our dopamine centers and make us feel good. So they're extra sort of grippy and graspy and pulling our attention because our attention and our brains are wired to move towards pleasure and move away from discomfort. Which is wonderful. And so I'm not like, I'm always, of the mindset of the middle way. So, I want to speak to the extremes and the detriment of these extremes and help people come back to the middle way. So I'm not saying that pleasure or stimulation or movies or TV or any of these things or social relationships or caring about your work or having responsibilities are bad things. I'm saying it's the quantity and the quality of our attention that is affected by that quantity, and empowering ourselves to grapple with a very overstimulating world. These are the important messages that I want to bring to your more focused attention. And yeah, so the problem with this overstimulation is it's exhausting. I mean, we only have so much brain power, and our brain is the mastermind of our body, and so our brains, desensitization and exhaustion is also our body's exhaustion, and our heart's exhaustion, and our capacity to grapple with and value life's exhaustion. So when we're overstimulated, we're worn down, and thus our capacity for life is limited. And so we live in an overstimulating world, and I don't think that that's an argument that we can really avoid. I don't know. I feel like that's pretty clear, And if you disagree, holler. Let me know if you think that this is if you ever go walk into nature, you're gonna see the opposite of the stimulation that that we get. We got Doggo here with us. So why I love float tanks. Float tanks are fucking amazing. They are a brand new thing on the scene here. Excuse me, she's sniffing my stuff. I guess it's okay that she's sniffing my stuff. I have dog trauma, so I'm working on it. You'll have to bear with me. Float tanks were designed to basically offer a sensory deprivation experience, and they've been used in a lot of different ways, and they've kind of come up in the spa world as a way to promote relaxation. And I have found incredible fucking benefit in them because they take you from one extreme of the spectrum to the overstimulation to the complete lack of stimulation, which I don't think we shouldn't really need. I think ideally there's a balance, of a world where we're not insanely stimulated, but we don't necessarily need to be, floating in space. But when you're living with the pendulum swung so far to one side, it really, really can help us find that middle when we swing to the other side for a little bit. And um, it's uncomfortable, because our bodies are so used to being stimulated to lay down in them. And to back up and give a description for those of you who don't know what a float tank is. It's basically a dark tank, sound protected walls, and they fill it with Epsom salts. Such that it's when you get in the water, you lay flat, lay butt naked, and you're just floating, and you're floating perfectly, such that with the darkness, the lack of sound, so all your sensations are, you're not being stimulated in any sensory ways. Your body actually stops perceiving gravity so much because you are floating, such that you feel weightless. And so gravity itself is a stimulation that we're constantly grappling with. If you've ever sat on a long plane ride or a long bus ride, like, that stimulation is gravity, and it wears on our bones and our bodies. So to remove that stimulation as well is really powerful. And we float in this tank, and basically it really is conducive to a meditative state where we are not processing so much shit from the outside world, and so we can really just settle into deep relaxation and healing, which the body really knows how to do, but our environments that most of us live in this day and age with this overstimulation are not super conducive to. So it allows us to settle into a state of biological being that is, I think, really invaluable to us in terms of finding peace of mind and closing tabs and settling into the present moment, settling into a gentle, loving, concentrated space. And I know a lot of people have used float tanks for a lot of different things. It has a lot of benefit to chronic pain, which can be really exacerbated just by our overstimulation and our nervous system stimulation. Peace of mind, quieting the mind. You do really feel incredibly relaxed walking out of it. I mean, I remember I first started doing it in Hanoi, where, like, motorbike traffic is absolutely bonkers and insanely stressful. And, like, you could get hit and lose a leg, like, at any point in time. And coming out of a 90-minute float, I'd get on the bike and be like, I'm floating on a cloud. And it's like, what a different relationship to a stressful environment that this can really implant into your being. So incredibly beneficial. I don't really want to go on too much about float tanks, but I think the point of it is, and I suppose this always will come back to meditation and the different practices of meditation. I think float tanks just being a space that can help us find a meditative state is building a concentration practice is, I think, the most essential thing we could possibly build as individuals and as a society this day and age. And there's so many different ways to frame what meditation does, and I think we've all heard the benefits, and they're all real. They're all absolutely fucking wonderful. But at its core, meditation is a concentration practice. And I think the benefit of it in this context is to help us concentrate and focus our attention and not be so spread thin by the overstimulation of the world. And like I said, that's exhausting. And so when we learn to center ourselves and focus, and so the meditative concentration practice is not a laser focus. It's not like, I gotta be, like, dialed in and I'm on Adderall and, like, really focus. It's like, no, it's a gentle attention. It can be precise, but it's gentle. It's peaceful. And the benefit of this is peace of mind and body and everything, because we're closing all these tabs and we're focusing on one thing. And instead of having 17 programs running in the background and vying for our attention and pulling us here and pulling us there, we got one thing to deal with. And it's such a peaceful way to relate to life. And whatever it is that you're doing, or however you're being, whether you're being present with somebody or you're working on a project, concentration is an antidote to the overstimulating, attention yanking, um, disconnecting, technologically advanced world that we live in. And so floating is just, I think, a really padded space for us to um, calm our nerves, step out of that overstimulating environment, and bring our concentration back into our body and into the space without um, so much junk going on. So, a lot of things thrown out there right now. I want to leave with something practical or inspiring or reflection. And so, my reflection questions are, take stock. It seems to be a theme of how I'm going to end these now. Take stock of where your attention is during the day. If you spend much of your day, a lot of us, work 9 to 5s and are at their computer. Where is your attention? Do you have many tabs open? Are you looking at YouTube and then shuffling back, to whatever your project is? Are you listening to music? Is there a window with a bunch of stuff going on outside? Like, pay attention to your environment and how much stimulation is going on, because yes, the mind's pretty good at kind of like zooming in, and there's a periphery that we are like kind of aware of, but that periphery definitely affects us. And so it's important for us to start to build awareness to how our environments are affecting our attention and our energy. And it is, I'm not saying that we all need to go live in nature or move out of the cities or live in float tanks necessarily, but I think it's really important for us to be honest with ourselves and start to pay attention to the effect that the world around us has on us. So if you're, living your days, working, playing in places that are very stimulating, and you're getting that stimulation constantly, it begs the question: how is this affecting my energy? If my attention is being spread by all these things, and the phone is a big piece of this too. Is like when our phone is sitting on the table, it's vying for our attention. There's a dopamine seeking sort of experience that's constantly going on in our brains, and our phones are designed to trigger that and to activate that and get you to reach for the phone. And so that's going to be vying for your attention. So pay attention to your environment and ask yourself, like, how could I improve my environment? And the float tank idea is about, and the meditation is about cultivating the skills and the capacity to grapple with the stimulating world by putting ourselves into a less stimulated, and most people, no, you're not going to go meditate in the middle of Times Square. You absolutely can. And that's definitely something that you can cultivate as a skill, to be able to sit and peacefully attend to your body and your breath in the middle of chaos. But for the most part, you go meditate in a quiet space, with some plants and a candle lit. You're taking yourself out of the stimulation to help generate, to help release a lot of these just hooks that these, stimulations have on our attention, and come back to the present moment and relax into a more peaceful, deep, nervous system healing and dealing state. And so I think the encouragement is if you're feeling like, if you take stock and you recognize, shit, like, I'm so overstimulated and wow, it actually is affecting my energy. Well, there's two things you can do. One, start to implement some of these practices: meditation, float tanks, doing yoga, journaling, nature, all of these things, where you swing the pendulum in the other direction, helps kind of find that middle ground where we're able to better grapple with the overstimulation of this world. And the other thing is environmental and lifestyle change. If you are at your workstation and your phone is constantly, pulling your attention away from your work, not only is that affecting your productivity, but it's also draining your energy by constantly switching tasks back and forth. And so, begs the question, maybe I get my phone out of my workplace. Maybe if, your workplace is super loud and there's, I don't know, I keep coming back to Times Square and imagining people living in Times Square and how like exhausting that background noise and stimulation walking in and out of your office must be. Maybe you plug in some sonotherapeutics in your headphones and just listen to some white noise or some nature sounds. Get your phone out of the way. Take breaks to take a deep breath and close your eyes. There's a lot of different things we can do to work with our environment. But so always first step is awareness, like taking stock, checking in, and like I hope that this is, brought up some ideas to help us, look in the direction that I'm pointing you to, take stock and be honest, like how am I being affected by the different stimulants, sensory and cognitive, in my environment and in my mind. How is that affecting my energy, my happiness, my well-being, my productivity? And if need be, how can I kind of swing the pendulum back to a more middle ground where I'm able to grapple with and be less drained by said stimulants. And that includes practices, dedicated practices to help us calm our nervous system and focus and step away from stimulation, as well as empowered choice and action to change our environment as need be. And that can be a big wake up call. I think a lot of people are moving, post COVID, moving, or during COVID, like moving out of the cities and moving to nature, and then finding, wow, it's actually way better for my mental health to be in the quiet. And I definitely can relate to the conditioning of being raised in and spending my 20s in cities and then feeling a little like on edge coming into nature and being like, oh boy, like how do I deal without stimulation, which is also uncomfortable in itself. But as you start to practice that and release that sort of need for constant stimulation, your shoulders relax and you start to breathe more deeply, and life is just much more easeful. And at the end of the day, there is certainly, I think, a very pleasure seeking culture that we have been promoted to be a part of. And so a lot of the stimulation is about pleasure. And I think there's a common misconception that happiness is pleasure. And it's, pleasure is a form of happiness, but happiness has so many fucking different flavors. It's like, it's not just one ice cream store, it's like 10 ice cream stores. And if we're only focused on pleasure as our source of happiness, we really drain our capacity for experiencing the fullness of life, and certainly to experience the other flavors of happiness that, are equally, in a lot of ways, more wonderful. Contentment, peace, calm, ease, trust, creativity, all of these um, come from having a balance with pleasure and stimulation. And so, if you're kind of like rooted in, I love my stimulation, again, I'm not saying we should, just live with earplugs in and eye shades on and walk around, like doofuses trying to navigate the world. It's like, no, like obviously we have to use our senses, and there are wonderful things that um, technology and convenience have brought to us, and we should use those things in balance. And though we have adapted in the short term to be able to grapple with them, over the long term, there are negative health consequences. There are negative mental health consequences. And I just want to bring to everyone's attention the reality of stimulations and overstimulations effect on our body and brain. And so it's very reasonable to have plenty of pleasure and stimulation. And I love music. I go to shows. I've seen a lot of light shows and loud music for the past 3 nights. It's been wonderful. But now I want some peace and calm, and I'm going to go into nature and just have some quiet. I found my balance of very pleasurable, stimulating experiences, and yet I'm going to continue to cultivate a sense of contentment and peace and ease. And that balance is, allows me to stay grounded and really live life fully. And so the encouragement is to, and I, at the expense of rambling on here, 25 minutes is pretty good, but if you're still listening, I appreciate you, and I hope that this has been helpful. It's been fun for me, so I'm happy if that's all it is. Um, yeah, create some space in your life to feel into some of these other uh, uh, flavors of happiness that require less stimulation, or honestly no stimulation. It's very, very within our capacity to sit and meditate and just be well without any stimulation, just to watch ourselves breathe, watch life live through our biology. And I want to encourage that. So if you're curious, go to a flow tank. It's fucking great. It's going to be a little uncomfortable at first, but you're going to feel fantastic once you kind of settle into it. And when you leave, I think everybody will notice, I think most people would notice a calming of their energy systems in a really, really peaceful way. And I think if we only know the very ramped up, like I've had a shit ton of coffee and everything is stimulating me and I love it and give me more kind of existence, yeah, we're not going to live very long, and we're going to have a pretty miserable second half of our lives, because that's killing us, to be straight fucking forward. So uh, sorry to end on a dire note, but it's the truth. We need to calm the fuck down, and I encourage you to intentionally bring some calm into your life. Okay, that's it. I love you. Have a wonderful now.